All right, in this section, I'm going to be covering how to estimate for your shingle roof. Doing this estimating is easy and requires just a little bit of math. You'll want to take your time and make sure that you get all of your measurements correct and double check your math, as this is going to ensure that your project goes smoothly. Nothing's worse than coming to the end of a long day and realizing you can't finish because you're lacking just a few key materials. In this section, I'll show you how to calculate the number of shingles that you'll need, as well as all of the accessory products such as nails, felt, and flashing. Now don't worry, if some of the materials are unfamiliar to you, I'll either go into detail later in this section about what they are and why they're needed, or I'm going to explain them in more detail in the particular section of the video that's dedicated to that item. So if you need clarification about something and I mentioned something here that doesn't really sound familiar, please refer to that section of the video before you finalize your order.
Hey everybody, thank you so much for watching this video. Please hit subscribe so you can be a part of my channel. You can watch all my videos that cover complete stages of both shingle and metal roofing. There's tons more content coming out soon about all aspects of roofing, including skylights and trim and sheds and whatever you're interested in.
The first step is getting a complete diagram of your roof. I'd advise you to take this information down in a notebook like this or a pad of paper, somewhere permanent, as you'll probably need to come back to your notes later. Don't just scribble this down on a random piece of paper that you're likely to lose later on. The first step is making a diagram of the house. Don't worry about it being completely to scale or pretty. You just want to make sure that you understand it and that you have all the facets of your roof in the drawing. I draw my roofs in a two-dimensional diagram as if I was looking at the roof from directly overhead. Now, if you're an artist and you want to do it differently, that's fine, but this is what makes sense to me. So this is a drawing of the model that we're going to be doing the filming on. You want to get up on your roof and take measurements of all the different facets, including the perimeter edges, valleys, ridges. You want to take the dimensions of any skylights, chimneys, and make notes about the location and sizes of any pipe. So, for example, we've got a PVC pipe right here on our model. I'm just going to make a little drawing like that. Make a note in my notes somewhere that it's a 2-inch PVC pipe, that sort of thing. You might think that you'll remember these things later, but it's always helpful to have as much information when you're putting your order together as you can, because it's kind of a pain to get back up on the roof. Okay, so I'm going to give you a pro tip here on an easy way to measure an area of your roof, even if you don't have a tape measure, or if you're having trouble accessing that part of the roof. For example, it's really high 2-story section, or it's really steep and you can't get on it, something like that. I even use some of these tips when I'm standing on the roof with a tape measure measuring it, because it's really easy. So to measure this section of roof, it's easier with the 3-tab than the architects, because the dimensions and stuff can be different. But with a 3-tab roof, it's really easy to measure it, because we know that standard 3-tab shingle is 3 feet wide, but that each tab itself is only 1 foot wide. So if you want to measure the width of the roof from the roof edge, you just simply count the number of tabs going over to wherever you want to measure to. So in this case, we can say this section is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 feet wide. And then you can also use that same knowledge to measure from the eave up to the ridge, okay? So we know that the reveal on these shingles is 5 inches. So what you have to do is count the number of shingle tabs going up from the eave to the ridge, okay? Multiply that times 5, you're going to have the number of inches then that go from where you started to where you finished. So you take the number of inches and you can then divide by 12, which will give you the number of feet from that point to the point where you stop counting. So that's a little tip that I use all the time to measure difficult areas of roof, or like I said, even when I'm standing on the roof, I use that. Just keep in mind that you want to double check and make sure that the reveal on the shingle and the tabs are the same size as you're expecting, because you can really make a big mistake if the reveal is different. Or there are some 3-tab looking shingles that don't have a 12-inch tab. So double check that first, but then you can use that tip to help you measure any part of the roof. Once you've got your basic dimensions together, you can go ahead and start putting together your order. To calculate the square footage, you're going to use 2 basic formulas for square footage or area. You're going to use formulas for squares and rectangles and formula for triangles. So what I want you to do is to break up all the different sections of your roof into either a square or a triangle. So I'm going to show you how to do that in a second. But no matter how large or small, if you can break up your roof into little squares or little triangles, you're going to be able to easily calculate the area of the roof. I want you to keep something in mind when you're doing all of this. It's not aerospace engineering. You need to get close, but don't sweat every square inch. It's called an estimate for a reason, okay? Use your best judgment, and I like to round up a little bit when you can, just to be sure that you're gonna have enough. All the materials that we order, for me, I've always been able to return later on if you don't use them. So round up, don't sweat the little details in the roof. You wanna get the big picture, okay? So if you're calculating the area for rectangles or squares, you can use the very simple formula, length times width. And this is going to give you the area of those sections. Okay, so what I do as I'm going through this is I keep a tally of all the measurements in my notebook. So you can see that in blue over here. These are, as I went through and measured all the areas, this is what I did. So you always want to write everything down, because you might want to come back later to check on something, to see if you missed it, to see if you've already calculated it. Some people's roofs might be very simple. Some people's roofs might be more complicated. So just make notes of everything that you've done, and then you'll be able to make sure later that you got everything that you need. So that you can see here how I've tallied up all the different square or rectangular sections of the roof. I've got this all down here. Again, in red on my diagram, I've got the different lengths and widths of the sample roof that we're doing. So length times width for the square sections. For the triangular sections of the roof, you're going to use the formula 1/2 rise over run. Okay, so this works for right triangles. So triangles like this that have a right angle on one side. So this is the run, and we'll call this the rise. It doesn't matter which size you do it. So it's 1/2 this distance times this distance. Okay, so if this is 10 and this is 5, the area of this triangle is going to be half this, which is 5, times 5, which is going to equal 25. Okay, so that's 1/2 rise over run. So if you have a gable section like this coming out of the roof, I like to imagine it like this. So you've got this little dormer, let's say, and one side of that roof is shaped like this. So what I do is break it up into a rectangle and a triangle. So you got this rectangle here, and you got a triangle here. So you can do 1/2 rise over run to figure this. You can figure length times width to calculate the dimensions of this rectangle. So in this case, for this little dormer roof, we're going to figure the area of this and then multiply it times 2, because the other side's exactly the same as this shape. So rectangles and triangles. That's the basic formulas that you're going to need to calculate all these different areas. Now, I know you might be thinking about the roof and your project coming at hand, and you thinking, well, I don't know if these rules don't really make it too clear, how to measure a certain section, and you might be right. It's not possible for me to cover every different roof type and shape. This is the best advice I can give you. Use your best judgment and break up the roof into as small size sections as you need it to make sense to you. Some people do this very differently than I do it. You might break this up into a bunch of different squares and rectangles. You might be able to look at the big picture and figure it out as a parallelogram. It doesn't really matter, and I can't explain it so that every single roof is going to make sense. But let me make this point. If your roof is so complicated that you're not able to figure out how to estimate it and figure out the square footage, you're probably getting in over your head with an overly complex project. So if you can't figure out the square footage to begin with, you might be getting in over your head. You might think twice about needing some help with your roof. Now, I hesitate to mention this next option for measuring your roof because it's really not necessary for most roofs. I do believe that getting on the roof yourself and measuring it and inspecting all the elements of your roof firsthand is extremely important, both to estimating correctly, but also to sizing up the scope of the work and the project before you. However, for whatever reason you may have, you may want to use an aerial roof measurement service that they can actually take a satellite photograph of your roof and provide you with the dimensions of your roof in a nice report like this one. This is a good one if the roof that you're going to be working on isn't close at hand, like you want to do your vacation cottage or something like that and you're not there. You can check this service out, and most houses that I try to use, they're able to get a report for sometimes, especially the real rural houses out in the country. Sometimes they don't have an aerial photograph, or there are a lot of trees overhead. You may not be able to get an adequate photograph for them to do the service. But there are a few different companies that do this. The one that we use the most is called EagleView. It's at eagleview.com. It's pretty easy to use. You're going to pay between $30 and $50 for a report. So check that out. If you're having trouble measuring it, or you need to double check your measurements, this is a great service too. But like I said, getting on the roof yourself is really your best bet, and this can be a crutch if you use it without really trying to get up on your roof. Once you've got all your numbers together, add them up to get a total base square footage. You can see where I've done that now. In this case, for the roof in question, we've got a base square footage of 1,275 square feet. So next, we're going to add a little bit of waste into our numbers. You're never going to need exactly 1,275 square feet of shingles. You're going to need a little extra. There's going to be some waste, that sort of thing on your project. So I've got a couple simple formulas that have served me well over the years to calculate the waste. So if your roof is pretty straightforward, you can generally figure a 12% waste factor. That's pretty much the minimum that you're going to want to start with. If your roof is real cut up, you've got a lot of valleys and angles and dormers and stuff like that, you're going to want to go to 15% waste. So to figure your total square footage of shingles that you're going to need, you just want to take your new number, and let's just say in this case we're going to go with a 12% waste, because the roof for our model is pretty straightforward. We've got this one hip over here, but overall we're somewhere at 12%. So you're going to multiply your number times, for 12%, you're going to multiply it times 1.12. So if you wanted 15%, you'd be 1.15. 20% would be 1.2. Okay, so hopefully you get the idea there. So multiply 1275 times 1.12, you come up with 1428. So this is the number that we're going to use when we're figuring the materials for this roof. Okay, so here's an important term for using when you're doing shingles, okay, is a square. You always want a square is equal to 100 square feet. So to figure a square, you want to take this number, divide it by 100, which is going to give you 14.28. So this is the number of squares that you have, 14.28 squares. For most shingles, and the ones that we're going to be working with in video, typically it takes 3 bundles of shingles to cover a square. If you're using a specialty shingle, you're going to need to check, because some of them are 4 bundles to a square or something like that. But basically all standard 3-tab and architectural shingles are going to be 3 bundles of shingles to the square, or 33 square feet per bundle. To figure out, we're going to start working on the materials now. To figure out the number of shingles that you need, you're going to multiply this number times 3. And that's going to give you the number of shingles that you need, okay? So to simplify things, let's just take off the 28 for now. We're going to do 14 times 3, which is going to give me 42 bundles of shingles. You always want to, if you come up with a fraction, like if I had multiplied 14.28 times 3, and you come up with 42 point something something, you always want to round up to the next full bundle. So I've got my list of materials over here, and I'm going to write this down. 42 bundles of shingles as we go. So of course, shingles aren't the only thing that you're going to need to do your job with. As you can see, I've got a list of all the typical items that you're going to need for your roof. Before I go any further though, I want to let you know that I've included a screenshot of these lists and formulas at the end of this video. So don't sweat trying to write all this right down. Right now, at the end of this section, there's going to be a list, and you can take your time and copy it down then. And again, you're going to want to watch all the videos to see exactly what you need to complete your order with. I like to make a list, and on one side of my piece of paper, and as I go through my diagram and add up all the different lengths and quantities, I can start filling in the information. So for your starter shingle, you're going to want to add up the length of the perimeter of your roof. Okay, so both the eave lengths, which is down here, like where your gutter would be, and the gable lengths, which is the side of your roof right here, are going to be included. This will make a little more sense as we're looking at the model, if this doesn't make sense in black and white. But so the starter shingle and the drip edge we'll cover in a second goes all the way around, all the edges. So anywhere you've got like a fascia board, so you're going to add all that up. So 5 feet, 10 feet, 15 feet, 40 feet. You add up all those numbers, and you're going to get the footage of starter shingle that you need. So I've gone through and added up all of the measurements around the perimeter for my diagram, and I realized I need 140 feet of starter. Now, we'll get into this in a section on starter shingles, but for now, I'll just say that I like to use a designated starter shingle. But you can also use a 3-tab. Again, we'll talk about that later. But if you're going to use the pre-made starter, double check the coverage rate of the shingle. In this case, the starter shingles that we're using come in bundles that cover 116 linear feet. So I need 140 feet. It comes in a bundle with 116 feet. So I'm going to need to order 2 bundles of the starter shingle to cover this. And so we'll have some extra of this left over. If you're using 3-tab shingles, you get 84 feet of coverage out of a typical bundle of 3-tab shingles. So on this job, again, to get 140 feet, we're just going to need to get 2 bundles of 3-tab shingles for our starter. So for the drip edge, you're going to use the same number of linear feet because the drip edge is going to go all the way around. You're going to use the same linear feet that you use for the starter shingle. Drip edge is typically sold in 10-foot sections. So to order that, we're going to need to divide 140 by 10, which is going to give us 14. I'm always going to round up a piece. If this number were 340, I'd round up a couple pieces because there's always going to be some waste. So anyway, 140 divided by 10 is going to be 14. So I'm going to go ahead and order 15 pieces of drip edge just to account for any waste. For your hip and ridge shingles, you'll need to watch that section of the video again to learn what type of shingle that you're going to use for this, for that part of your roof. It's pretty easy to calculate the amount of these shingles that you're going to need from your diagram. You're going to add up both the ridge lengths here, which is 40, and the hip lengths here, which is 12 and 12. We've got a little ridge here that's 8 feet. We've got a little ridge here on our dormer that's 10 feet. So if you're using 3-tab shingles for your hip and ridge, you're going to get 35 linear feet of coverage from a bundle of shingles. In this case, we've added it up. I've got 82 linear feet that we need. So divide that by 35, we're going to need 3 bundles of hip and ridge shingles for this job. So I make that note. If you're using a designated hip and ridge shingle, you're going to need to check with the manufacturer, with your supply house, to see how much coverage you're going to get out of that particular bundle and order accordingly based on that measurement. For felt or underlayments, you're going to use the number of squares that you used for your shingles to figure out how much felt that you need. 15-pound felt comes in 4 squares to the roll. 30-pound felt comes in 2 squares to the roll. And if you're going to use a synthetic underlayment, be sure to check the coverage rate. It's usually 10 squares to the roll. In this case, we're going to be using a 30-pound felt. So I take the number of squares we have, which is 14, and divide by 2, which is going to give us 7 rolls. Again, you always want to round up. So 14 divided by 2 is a nice even number, but if we got a 7.3, you'd always want to round to 8. So I'm going to put that down here. So you'll need something to attach the felt with, and I'm going to go into this in the section on underlayments. I recommend using a plastic cap nail. that's either an inch or an inch and a quarter. These type of nails are typically sold by the count of nails and not by the pound. So you're going to need about 80 nails per square. So for this roof, 14 times 80 is 1120. And it's probably going to be a bigger quantity. You can't just order 1120 nails, obviously. So you're probably going to end up just with a bucket or whatever the smallest container they have. So for your shingles, you're going to need a nail as well, obviously. I recommend using an inch and a quarter nail if you're going to tear off and just go back with a regular felt and all that. So if you're going to hand drive your nails, you're going to want to order 2 pounds of hand drive nails per square. So if we've got 14 squares, 14 times 2 is 28. So we're going to need 28 pounds of nails for use in this job. If you're planning on using a nail gun, your nails are sold in boxes of coils of nails. There's typically 7,200 nails in a case, in a box of the coil nails. So you'll be able to get approximately 18 to 20 squares of roofing on per box. So for this job, because we're under that number, we're just going to have to go ahead and order 1 box of nails. So I'll get that down here. The amount of ice guard, also called ice and water shield, that you'll need will depend greatly on which climate you live in. And again, we'll talk about this later, but in the section of the video. But you'll have to watch that first to figure out how much you need. For sure, even here where I live in the South, we're going to use at least one roll around the valleys and the different penetrations and stuff like that. So after you've watched that section, you'll be able to figure out a little bit better how much you need. If you need a lot of ice protection going up your eaves, you might need a couple rolls. Like I said, minimum, you're going to want to have 1 roll of ice and water shield. So you need to order flashings for the different pipes that are coming out of your roof. In the section on pipe flashings, you're going to learn about the different options for flashing your plumbing penetrations. Make sure that you've noted on your diagram how many pipes you have and what their diameter are. You can measure the diameter very easily by just taking a tape measure. While you're standing on the roof, you got your pipe there, you can just take your tape measure and pull it across the top of your pipe at the fattest part, and that'll give you the diameter of the pipe. If you use my method for doubling up your pipe flashings, make sure to order twice as many of the plastic pipe flashings. Okay, so to order the ridge vent, you're going to watch that section to figure out where you're going to want to use your ridge vent. In this case, we're just going to put a ridge vent on the main section, and not, you've got little ridges here and little ridges here. On our model, that you'll see it's not really going to work. So we're just going to do one on this main section. So most ridge vents are sold in 4-foot lengths. The shingle over type that we'll be demonstrating with. So in this case, we've got 40 feet of ridge. So you can divide 40 by 4 and you're going to get 10 pieces of ridge vent that you'll need. So we got ridge vents down here, 10 pieces. You'll also want to make sure and determine if your ridge vent is sold with 3-inch nails, which is what you use to apply the ridge vent with. In this case, the brand that we use already comes with the number of nails you need, so you don't have to worry about that. You're going to need to use some type of sealant on your roof to seal around the flashings, the pipes and the chimneys and that sort of thing. This is one area where I don't recommend cutting corners. You want to get the most premium, best sealant from your roofing supplier and try to avoid the off-the-shelf items that are typically sold for painting. So most of the caulks that you find in like your big box stores and stuff like that, in my opinion, aren't great for roofing. Check with your supplier to find out the best variety of sealant. There's a bunch of good varieties out here. I've got 2 that we use a lot here. So I'm not trying to endorse these 2 particular brands, but they've worked really well. Talk to the folks at the supply house and find out what the pros in your areas, what the pro in your areas use. I also recommend you can get this MP1, for example, in a color match caulk that'll match the shingle color. But I like using a clear caulk many times because it's less likely to show up if you get some on the house or the trim work. So check for, if you can't get a real close color match or you're not sure about that, you can just go ahead and go with a clear caulk like this through the roof. I'm not a huge fan of using plastic roofing cement because I've seen it wear out prematurely in a lot of instances. It does work well in a couple areas that we'll go through where you apply it underneath the shingles or flashing that you're working on. Instead of getting it in a bucket with a trowel that's real messy, for an easier applications, you can get it in a tube like this. That's the way that I like to do it. If you need to use it from a bucket or a larger amount, you want to get like a little masonry trowel or something disposable that you can help to apply it with and then throw away when you're done, because it's going to get pretty sticky. So it's hard to generalize as to how many tubes of sealant that you're going to need on a given job. Even on a small job or a pretty simple roof like we have, I'd probably go ahead and order 2 tubes. If you've got a bunch of chimneys or different flashings that you think you're going to need to use your sealant on, order a couple more. Again, that's something that you could probably easily take back if you don't use, or maybe use it for something else along the way. So for this roof, it's pretty simple. We don't have a lot of different things we're going to need to caulk up. I'm just going to put two tubes of caulk down. One thing I like to do when we're all done with the roof is to paint the PVC pipes and the different metal pipes and flashings that come out of the roof. So it's a nice touch that helps blend the white PVC pipes into the roof. Most suppliers carry a paint that will match the different colors of the shingles. You don't have to get it exactly matched, but you get a can of spray paint like this. It's a couple bucks. It's not anything more than an aesthetic thing, but it does help it make it look good, especially if some of the pipes are on the front of the house or something like that. You might have an old metal pipe that's a little rusty. You can touch it up. It may not last forever, but it'll definitely leave you with a good looking roof when you're done. So that does it for the basics of your order. Obviously, you may have some other items to order if you have different square vents, you have skylights, chimneys. You may have to order some more materials for that, and I've listed some of them down here. But as we go through the different sections of the roof, you'll probably become more aware of what materials that you'll need and what you'll have to order. So just wait till you've watched all the sections of the video, and you'll have a better idea of the materials that you're going to need for any given section. While I've designed this section to work as well with most common roofing materials, depending on where you live and where you are ordering your materials from, you may have to change things up a bit. In my experience, the folks at your building supply store or roofing warehouse where you order the materials from are a great resource to utilize to help you get all the items you need. They're pros, they know what they carry, they know about what you're going to need. So you should definitely direct any questions about specific products that they carry and how they figure into the measurements that I've given you to those folks, and they'll help you get what you need. And that's the basics on estimating and ordering materials for your roof.
If you'd like the complete series for yourself on how to do shingle or metal roofing, you can go to my website, RoofingIntelligence.com, and there you can get a membership to either stream or you can get a DVD in the mail that'll show you how to do all the steps for either of those types of roofing. Enjoy this video. Thanks so much for watching.